Romemu. Romemu. Can you say ro? Me. Mu. Romemu. Yofi. Yofi. Romemu, what does Romemu mean? To elevate. Who said to elevate? Yes, to elevate. Right? Not only is it to elevate, that's what it says on our title. It says Romemu, Jewish life elevated, right? It says Jewish life elevated. Has everybody seen that? Jeff, right? Am I right? So it says that's the Jewish life elevated. So Romemu, yeah, to elevate, to rise up. Rabbi David, who says hi, by the way, says hi to everybody from Israel. I told him I'm giving the Dvar Torah. He said, great, don't talk about politics. So, right. I'm going to do my best. So Rabbi David tells the story about starting Romemu. I saw this in a video where he says, he talks about Romemu's humble beginnings in 2006, where he talks about how he printed out 1,000 flyers and handed them out. Do you know this story? Some of you know this story? Well, this is what he tells. He printed out 1,000 flyers, and he was standing here on the Upper West Side, not far from here, and handing them out, saying, new shul, new shul in town. And he talks about, how people showed up with their feet, how he was out all day until he finished those 1,000 flyers. And when I was listening to that story, I started thinking about what I was doing at that time. I started thinking, where was I in 2006? A year before that, which was 20 years ago now, I was in the disengagement in the Gaza Strip. That was 20 years ago this week, by the way. But in 2006, I was in the States, and I was in my shlichut. I was doing a shlichut, because I grew up in Israel, if you didn't know that yet. And I was coming back to Israel, and I was actually telling Judah this story a few days ago, where I was also sort of handing out flyers in my own way. I came back to Israel, and I started knocking on doors, because I decided at the time that I'm going to be a musician. That's what I said. Told myself I finished my army service in the IDF. I was an officer for a few years, and then I went to the States for 2 years. I came back to Israel, and I said, I'm going to be a musician. So on the one hand, I matriculated in Rimon, which is in Ramat HaSharon, School of Music. And I also started knocking on doors physically. I started walking to assisted living homes and to gymborees, on the other hand. I started knocking on doors and saying, hi, I'm Shimon. I'm here to do music. Here's my guitar, and would you hire me to do music? And that's what I did, and it was pretty successful. It was pretty successful. I started a career then as a musician, and I went from place to place, and I filled up my calendar, and I made connection. Work came, music came, connection, and it was a great time. And when Rabbi David talks about those first services here, and that the flyers work, and people started coming, who here was in those first services? There's some? You guys were in those first services. And it was in the gym. It was a tiny space. It started building up and up. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and people just started coming, and people showed up. And it sounds like it was amazing. Like, it sounds like it was an amazing time. And it sounds like it was truly uplifting. And when they say Romemu, right? So Romemu Adonai Eloheinu. That's the next part of Romemu. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu. Rise up, elevate God. Elevate God. Rising up together in song. So Romemu, really beautiful name. And I love working at Romemu, and I love the services that we create here. And in this week's Torah portion, I have to tell you, in Parashat Ekev, we encounter a wrong kind of Romemu. Maybe Romemu's nemesis, if you will. And it's the same verb, rom, ram, right? The dangers of rising up. Because Moshe tells us what will happen, ekev tishme'un. That's what it says, ekev tishme'un. And that word tishme'un is that's like my name, but with a taf at the beginning. Shimon, but with a taf. Tishme'un. So what will happen, ekev could be after, but ekev is, if you really study the Hebrew, ekev has many meanings, and we'll get into that. But what will happen after? What will happen after we hear all of God's mitzvot? And Moshe is telling us this story about what will happen after we hear those mitzvot, and what will happen after we become comfortable. What happens after we're in the land and we become comfortable? And he's talking about complacency. And what will happen if we become complacent and comfortable in where we're at? And he says, Veram levavecha. Veram levavecha. Your heart will be lifted up. Your heart will be elevated, which sounds kind of nice, but that's not a compliment. Okay? It's not a compliment that we're getting there, because he's warning us about being too proud. He's warning us about what happens if our hearts rise up. Instead of Romamu Adonai, Ram levavecha. About thinking that it is I and I alone that has created this success, or this place where I'm at, or where I'm at this moment. Not even necessarily success, but where I'm at in this very moment is thanks to me. That is what the warning is in this parsha. What will happen if we forget our past? To forget how we got here. So you see, the Torah warns us of complacency and what might happen if we got everything that we want. And Moshe tells us that in a warning. He says, do you think that kochi ve'otzem yadi asali et hachayil hazeh? Do you think that it was my strength and my power alone that made this happen? No, Moshe says, it is not. Yes, our Torah portion warns us that the very thing that we sometimes seek the most, comfort, that comfort that we seek, what will happen when we finally get comfortable? So I want to be comfortable. I don't know about you. I want everything to go exactly the way I want it to go. I want Judah to play the chords that I'm asking him to play. I want Glenn to play the drums in the exact way that I want. I want Lauren to sing more. I want perfect sound online from Craig. I just made a list here of things I want. I want Victor not to work so hard. I'd like my own house in Cape Cod that I don't have to pay for it every summer. I'd like my daughter to have everything that she needs. And I want my wife to have what she wants. I want. Can we say that? I want. Let's get out of our systems. Is that too much to ask? Is it too much to ask? I want peace. Ugh. See, I'm just thinking about myself. You see? Yes. What do I want, right? Yes. Shimon, Moshe tells me, right? He says, Moshe, it's like my friend, Moshe. Moshe tells me, he says, Tishme'un, he says to me. Shimon, he says, it doesn't work that way. Your name is Shimon, correct? Moshe is telling me. So listen, that's my name. My name is to listen, Shimon. A person who, somebody once told me that Shimon means walkman. It's like, because a walkman, a listener, a Shimon. So, yeah. You know what a walkman is? Yeah, you know what a walkman? Anybody know what a walkman is? I know for some of you know. So, not just in the moment, but in the after moment. That's ekev. Aya ekev tishme'un. What are you listening in that after moment? What are you hearing? And that's what Rashi tells us. Rashi tells us that ekev is after. So what happens after we listened? What happens after we succeed? What happens after the challenge, after a loss? What happens, that's the ekev, that's the heel. Ekev is also a heel. The trailing thoughts that follow big events. Are they thoughts of humility? Or are they thoughts of pride? In our Torah portion, Moshe asks us, hey, he says, hey, what does God ask of you? He says, what does God, Ma Elohim sho'el me'imach, he says, that word sho'el, borrows. What does God want to borrow from you? And Moshe, he creates a pretty simple picture. And the way that Rabbi Zalman Schachter Shalomi, who, Rabbi David's mentor and the creator of Renewal Judaism, the way that he puts this part of the Torah portion, he says it this way. He says, so, Jews, that's how he says. So, Jews, he says, what does God want from you? Only that you should respect God, and that you should go on God's ways, and that you should love God, and to serve Yah and your God wholeheartedly with spirit, to fulfill the mitzvot of God, and the things I command you this day for your own good. That's what it says in this Torah portion, and that's Rabbi Zalman Schachter Shlomi's interpretation of that. So, okay, that doesn't sound too hard, right? Right. That's pretty hard, that sounds. It sounds like a very tall order. It's very high expectations of us, what God expects of us. And Moshe kind of paints it of, what does God ask of you? And it's not easy. It's very high expectations. And we're only human. I want to shout to God. I want to say, we're only human. Right? So we've become complacent. We got used to things. We got a little bit comfortable. But now what? I have to do all of those things that you're saying? Is that what I have to do? So Ekev also tells us what to do when we've already stumbled. Because when I'm reading the Torah portion, I ask myself, I say, so if I am in that complacency that Moshe is telling us, and we can all think if we're in that complacency, if we've got too used to the fact, too used to what's going on, if we think that even the troubles that we're going through, that's just the way it is, Ekev gives us a solution. And it tells us that if we've stumbled, it's not too late. And how does our Torah portion tell us that? It says that if our hearts have already risen in pride, if I've already forgotten, it tells us to remember the tablets. In our Torah portion, Moshe recounts the terrible incident with the golden calf and his breaking of the first tablets and his anger and making the new tablets. And the Talmud gives us more info on what happened to those broken tablets. And I know many of you have heard this before. The Talmud says, Luchot v'shivrei luchot munachim ba'aron. The tablets and the broken pieces of the tablets were placed together in the ark. In the ark, the broken tablets were kept alongside the whole. We live with both of those, the perfect moments and the shattered ones. Mistakes, if we make a mistake, this Torah portion tells us, it can't be as bad as the golden calf. That's what this Torah portion is telling us. They can sit right beside our wholeness if we let that teach us, if we let our brokenness teach us. And when I was thinking about this, and I was thinking about the Torah portion, I was thinking about my Aunt Shoshana, that I'd like to dedicate this Devar Torah to her. Because my Aunt Shoshana, this week it has been 10 years since she passed away. And she was my mother's older sister, the middle sister of 3 sisters, born and raised in Brooklyn. And she was born in the same year that Israel was born, in 1948. And she soaked in the spirit of the civil rights era. She poured it into her Jewish story. She made Aliyah in the 70s. And she used her akev, right? So akev is also her heels, and in Hebrew, akevim is just shoes that are heels, right? And she used her heels. She made Aliyah. She had 8 kids. And today they have 40 grandchildren. Yeah. I'm really sad that she isn't with us today. And I learned a lot from her. She loved music. She loved Paul Simon. Yeah. And she loved a Jewish song that we are about to sing every day in about a week and a half when the month of Elul starts, leading up to the high holidays, which is in that time that we're at now. We're leading up to the high holidays. And she loved the version that we sing here at Romamu from Psalm 27, that we learn in it what we should be asking God. Because if in our parasha we learn what God is asking of us, in Psalm 27 we have an answer of what we should ask from him. We say, Achat sha'alti me'et Adonai ota avakesh. שבתי בבית אדוני כל ימי חיי, לחזות בנועם אדוני ולבקר בהיכלו. So we ask, all we ask of God is to sit with God. That's all we're asking. That's all we should be asking. We're asking with God to sit with God all our lives, to dwell in your house. What will happen according to the psalmist if we do that? That is discovered in the next line where it says, "Yitzpineni besukko beyom ra'a, yastireni beseter ohalo, betzur yeromemeni." Yeromemeni. I'm going to say that one more time. Yeromemeni. Yeromemeni, which God will romamu me. That's what it means. That's what will happen if we dwell in the house. Yeromemeni. Right? He will lift us up. Not lift our ego, but lift a lift of gratitude, of belonging to something greater than ourselves. That's the difference, because when God lifts us up, and God is, whatever whatever each of us define that God is, and our rising is steadied by humility. And when we lift ourselves without that grounding, then we drift into complacency. So how do we, as the different recovery programs teach, let go and let God? How do we do that? How do we let go and actually let God in? However you want to define God. How do we let God lift us? So in the 18th century, there's a book of Hasidism called the Tanya. And the Tanya tells us about how to lead a Jewish life of spirituality. And it states to us, it says, Moach shalit al halev. That's what it says, Moach shalit al halev, which means the mind rules the heart. And it's kind of, for me, when I hear that, I'm like, whoa, what's going on here? The mind over the heart. So the mind rules the heart. And what does that mean? So Hasidism tells us, and a lot of other practices, that when we can feel the rise of ego, and we feel that ego coming up, the pull of self-protection, when we feel like we need to protect ourselves, we can still choose differently. That's the rewiring that I know that I try to do a lot from different things that I got used to from my childhood. I got used to staying away from arguments because because I tried an argument once and some kid won, And so I stay away from myself. I'm trying to rewire that. I'm trying to feel like it's not that I need to run into arguments, but I can try every day to use my mind to get back into myself, to not forget where I came from. And that's what Moshe tells us. He tells us that remembering doesn't mean to live in the past. It doesn't mean that if we remember, we're living there. It doesn't mean that the past was better, right? It doesn't mean that we need to live there. It means that carrying the lessons and the emotions, carrying those broken tablets alongside the whole, to not push away our broken tablets, the broken tablets of our lives. Because what we push away will circle back to us and repeat itself. How do we find that place where we're standing on the street and handing out 1,000 flyers? How do we find that place where we're knocking on doors? What are those doors that you're knocking on and that you can feel that you can knock on? And my Aunt Shoshana taught her kids that humility is not weakness, that brokenness is not a disqualification. She knew that she couldn't change the whole world, but she also knew that she couldn't cease trying. She started with herself. She started with her people and the people around her. And when I think of her and her patience and her way of empathy, it makes me think, are we really listening to our friends, to our coworkers, to our spouse, to our children, to our friends, to our colleagues, to my dog? So as we continue to rise up on these Shabbatot Nechama, on these Shabbatot that are leading up to the high holidays, let us rise, yes, but rise in a way that lifts others up. Let's rise like Romamu, Jewish life elevated, grounded in humility, rooted in memory, open to repair. Rise with gratitude, rise with listening, and rise with love. Please rise.